Meanwhile, in TUPAC news,
The shooting of TUPAC Shakur once again underscores the violence that has surrounded this man since he shot the superstar.
People pulled up, opened fire. Shakur and Knight.
TUPAC Shakur was shot several times in the chest.
Shakur was pronounced dead.
Makaveli in this Illuminati, all through your body. The blows like a 12-gauge shot. Feel me?
James Marshall Hendrix, born on November the 27th, 1942, died on September the 18th, 1970.
Music: The mysterious details of Jimi Hendrix's tragic death. What happens when an icon loved by millions of people dies in mysterious circumstances? Many stories start to emerge trying to solve the mystery. That's exactly what happened with Jimi Hendrix, one of the best guitarists in history. Publicidad. The 60s were such an enigmatic and iconic era. It gave us great fashion, alternative lifestyles, and some of the best musicians in history. We had the British invasion with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and of course the three J's, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and the great Jimi Hendrix. I bet no one at the time would have imagined that these three musical giants would have more in common than the fact that their names started with the same letter. All three passed away in a strange coincidence at the age of 27, also in the same year, starting what would become known as the 27 Club. The 60s were also all about experimenting with drugs and alcohol, which was the official cause of death for these three artists, but what if this wasn't the real reason? In Joplin's case, the autopsy was very clear. As for Morrison, there have always been doubts about his death, but the medical records state that this was the main cause. But what about Hendrix, one of the most influential musicians in the history of rock? Well, the official story isn't that convincing because it's filled with inconsistencies and contradictions. His death and the details surrounding it have led to countless stories that go from logical speculation to incredibly elaborate conspiracy theories that are both hard to verify and debunk. But what really happened during the first hours of that September 18th in 1970? Just 1 year after rocking everyone's socks off at Woodstock, Hendrix was found dead in his London apartment by paramedics. As the story goes, he had been partying the night before and had a little fight with his girlfriend, Monica Danman, who wanted to leave the party. He agreed and went to the apartment, where, according to Danman, he asked for some Vesperax, the pill he used for sleeping. A few hours later, she woke up and saw that Jimi was profoundly asleep, so she decided to go get some cigarettes, only to find the musician unconscious in bed when she got back. She called an ambulance, and the paramedics tried to revive him in a futile attempt. They took him to the hospital, where he was declared dead at 12:45 p.m. The official reports claim that he had huge amounts of alcohol in his stomach and lungs, making the official cause of death, intoxication, and suffocation with his own vomit. Now, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, this is only Danman's version of the story. According to paramedic Greg Jones, who went to the apartment that morning, when they got there, the door was open, but Danman was gone. They saw Jimi's body covered in vomit, not breathing and very still. However, they still tried all the maneuvers to see if they could bring him back, which, as we know, they couldn't. Dr. Martin Seifert, who received him at the hospital, declared that when he arrived at the hospital, it was obvious that he had been dead for some time and that the paramedics' attempts had been mere formalities. Besides the amount of alcohol found in his body, the autopsy revealed that he had taken 9 Vesperax pills, which the doctors said was 18 times the legal dose. Along with Eric Burdon's, member of the Animals and with whom he had partied the night before, statement about his death being a suicide, everybody started creating their own versions of what happened. But soon after, the theory was debunked with evidence. For starters, the autopsy didn't reveal any evidence pointing to suicide. Also, the amount of pills he took didn't prove anything since he was found with 42 more pills in his pocket. If it had been a suicide attempt, he would have taken all of them. But why did he take so many? According to people close to him, Hendrix suffered from chronic insomnia, so a single pill wouldn't help him, and he used to take many at a time to fall asleep. The first suspect was, of course, Danman, who wasn't even in the apartment when the paramedics arrived. When she was finally found, her many declarations were contradictory and full of inconsistencies. But there was never any evidence against her, and the investigation didn't do enough to look into the gaps in her story and her suspicious behavior. Others claim that it was his manager, Mike Jeffrey, whose controlling and manipulative actions towards the musician were no secret. It's believed that he also stole money from Hendrix and transferred it to his personal account, not to mention the $1 million life insurance policy that had him as the only beneficiary. Now, at the time of Jimi's death, Jeffrey was in Spain, but for a lot of people, this doesn't really change anything. These two versions don't sound that crazy or far-fetched, right? Well, the third theory belongs to the wonderful world of conspiracy theories, and it's actually the most popular right now. It's believed that the COINTELPRO, also known as the FBI's counterintelligence program, had a scheme to get rid of all subversive characters in the country. According to this theory, many musicians were investigated for being dangerous influences for young people. Hendrix's ability to move and inspire the masses was seen as a threat since the musician had allegedly made a public statement asking the Black Panthers to go to Washington and shoot members of the government. Because of this, some people believe it was the government who decided to eradicate this threat as soon as possible.
Hendrix had publicly called upon the Black Panther Party to go to Washington, D.C. and shoot the place up.
The concept is this, basically. The whole black nation has to be put together as a black army.
COINTELPRO government plot to eradicate such leaders. Hendrix's connection to manager Mike Jeffrey only furthered his surveillance by the FBI.
Life is a traffic jam. Life is a traffic jam. Life is a traffic jam.
Only Gab can do it like this. Yo, YouTube, what up? It's your homie Gab, I'm in the building. And this is MAKAVELI Media. Today, I got something very special for y'all. Now, one of my YouTube subscribers has been asking me for weeks, maybe months. He was asking me to do a video on Jimi Hendrix and Tupac. On the rap god, TUPAC Shakur, and the rock god, the one and only, Mr. Jimi Hendrix. Brother, I used to see your comment a million different places in my comment section. I was trying to get your name and I can't find it nowhere. So please, don't take me not mentioning your name as a sign of disrespect. I just couldn't find it. But I hope this video, you find enjoyable. Now, Jimi Hendrix was so bad that the guy couldn't read or write music. And what he has created cannot be duplicated to this day. He is completely unique and one of a kind. To the point where they didn't make left-handed guitars. So Jimi Hendrix, who was self-taught, flipped the right-handed guitar upside down and learned the notes backwards. Then later on, he would restring it and play it. But until then, he used to play the notes backwards. Unbelievable. And, some of my favorite Jimi Hendrix tracks of all times are Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, and Hey Joe, and The Watchtowers. Yeah, that's flavor. Well, y'all know I'm a little bit more deeper than that. I found the similarities between Jimi Hendrix's life and Tupac's life, and also their deaths, to be uncanny. We could start with the typical. The typical was both of them being hurled as the tops in their class. People saying the greatest rapper of all time is Tupac Shakur, hands down. And the greatest guitarist, some people say rock and roll or / musician of all time is Jimi Hendrix, hands down. Both genius level at what they did. And they both had a hell of an influence on the masses, people of all colors, people of all creeds, people of all races. And they both were very political, and they both was viewed as a threat. Their influence definitely posed a threat to the powers that be. And those powers probably had to eradicate the threat by eliminating them. In my humble opinion, that's what I believe. Because we all know what happened in Tupac's death and the hurl of mystery that revolves around his death. And the same thing could be said about Jimi Hendrix. His death was at first ruled an accidental death. He took too many sleeping pills, mixed it with alcohol. Then his friends said it was a suicide. Then they did a further inspection with the autopsy, and they saw that Jimi Hendrix didn't succumb to the sleep aids he took, and he didn't succumb to the alcohol because he had a very low amount of alcohol in his bloodstream and in his lungs. But what they believe happened to him, that he was drowned. The alcohol was poured down his throat. Now recently, a young lady claiming to be inside the flat with Jimi Hendrix over in London said that some guys came in there in the middle of the night and helped him down and poured liquor down his throat. So apparently he drowned in red wine. Now, why that would happen to Jimi Hendrix, we can speculate. His manager, Mike Jeffries, had ties to the government. He was a known agent, and he had mob ties as well. So it was just a recipe for disaster. He had also took out $1 million life insurance policy on Jimi Hendrix, and he also got the rights to his music when he passed. But everybody that was involved in this death died mysteriously, and nobody's really alive to tell except this one young lady I was telling you about. Well, she was young when it happened, but she's no longer young. And her story just damn near disappeared off the internet. I would say that was about 5 years ago, maybe. She came forward and said she was in the room. Mike Jeffries, Jimi Hendrix's manager, died in 1973, 3 years after Jimi Hendrix passing. He died in, I believe, a car accident. And the young lady that was going with Jimi Hendrix, not the young lady that told recently, but it was his girlfriend that was in the room with him, who some people accused of his murder, also died in like the 1990s, I want to say, and she killed herself. A lot of people say it was grief. Some people say it was guilt. I don't know. Jimi Hendrix died September the 18th, 1970. And less than a year later, June 16th, 1971, TUPAC Shakur was born. But he also died in September. But Jimi Hendrix's political stance against nonviolence and anti-war and against, racial discrimination also made him a target. And, his growing familiarity with the Black Panther Party rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as well. Because Jimi Hendrix was coming out saying that he was going to start endorsing the Black Panther Party. And he was starting to give money to them. And he came out and had a couple requests, as you saw in the earlier clips of this video, that he wanted the Black Panther Party to pull off for him. But needless to say, Hendrix didn't like, the way race relations were going here in the country, and a lot of things disgusted him. So he would spend most of his time outside of the country, over in Europe. And that's where he eventually lost his life. But yeah, Jimi Hendrix is definitely a rock and roll legend. Definitely a legend. And nothing but props. Salute. And once again, there is a connection between him and TUPAC Shakur. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you found it informative. I hope you guys share this video. Hope you like it and subscribe to the channel. Well, anyway, I'm signing off. It's your homie Gab. I'm out of here. I'm about to hit y'all with the peace.